The orchestra was halfway through Winter Wonderland when Dean Martin saw him. Row 7, seat 12, a face he hadn't looked at directly in 10 years. Jerry Lewis was sitting in the audience of Dean Martin's 1967 NBC Christmas Special, and nobody, not the producers, not the network, not even Dean, had any idea he was coming. Dean's voice faltered, just for half a beat, the kind of mistake most people wouldn't notice. But the bandleader noticed. He glanced at Dean, concerned, but Dean kept singing. His eyes, however, had stopped moving. They were locked on row 7. It was December 16, 1967, Studio 4 at NBC Burbank. 40 million people would watch this special when it aired on Christmas Eve. Dean had done 73 takes that week, perfecting every joke, every song, every carefully choreographed moment of effortless charm. But nothing in the script accounted for Jerry Lewis showing up unannounced. They hadn't spoken since 1956. 11 years of silence, so complete that when people asked Dean about Jerry, he'd smile that practice smile and say, "Who?" As if Jerry Lewis, his partner of 10 years, his brother, his other half, had never existed at all. But Jerry existed, and he was sitting in row 7, wearing a dark suit and sunglasses indoors, trying to be invisible in a room where invisibility was impossible. Dean finished Winter Wonderland. The audience applauded. The studio was warm, almost too warm, packed with 300 people, and stage lights hot enough to melt makeup. Dean took a sip of water, actually water, not the prop scotch people assumed was in every glass he touched. "Thank you, folks," Dean said into the camera. "You're very kind. We've got a wonderful show for you tonight. I'm going to sing some Christmas songs, tell some jokes, and with any luck, nobody will throw anything at me." The audience laughed. Dean's timing was perfect. It was always perfect. That's what made him Dean Martin, the guy who made everything look like it happened by accident when every second was calculated down to the breath. But then Dean did something that wasn't in the script. He looked directly at row 7. "We've got a special audience tonight," Dean said, his voice casual, almost throwaway. "Some people I haven't seen in a while." The director, a man named Greg Garrison, went rigid in the control booth. This wasn't in the rundown. Dean was ad-libbing on a live-to-tape special with 40 million viewers on the line. "Greg," the assistant director whispered, "what's he doing?" "I don't know," Greg said. "Keep rolling." Dean set his microphone back on the stand. The band, confused, kept playing light background music. Dean walked to the edge of the stage, his movements slow, deliberate. He was looking at someone. The camera operators didn't know who. The audience didn't know who. But Jerry Lewis knew. He'd been recognized. Jerry had come to the taping on impulse, a stupid, desperate impulse that he'd been fighting for 3 weeks. His assistant had gotten him a ticket, just a regular audience ticket, nothing special, and Jerry had told himself he'd just watch, just see Dean perform one more time, just remind himself that Dean was fine without him, thriving even. But now Dean was walking toward him, and Jerry's hands, resting on his knees, started to shake. The audience sensed something, that particular tension that comes when a performer breaks the fourth wall, when something unscripted is happening, when the carefully constructed illusion of television starts to crack and something real bleeds through. Dean stopped at the edge of the stage, directly in front of row 7. He looked down at Jerry Lewis. The sunglasses weren't enough to hide behind anymore. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean said, his voice measured, empty of inflection, "we have someone very special in our audience tonight." Jerry went pale. He shook his head slightly. "No, don't." "Someone I used to know," Dean continued. "Someone I used to work with." The audience murmured. A few people in the rows near Jerry turned to look. They recognized him. How could they not? Jerry Lewis was as famous as Dean. More famous, some would argue. His movies were massive, his telethons were legendary. But here, in this moment, he looked small. "Jerry," Dean said, "just the name, nothing else." The studio went silent. You could hear the hum of the stage lights, the shuffle of a cameraman adjusting his position. Someone in the audience coughed, and it sounded like a gunshot. Jerry stood up slowly. He didn't want to. His body was screaming at him to leave, to run, to get out before this became something he couldn't take back. But Dean was looking at him, really looking at him for the first time in 11 years. "Hi, Dean," Jerry said, his voice cracked. Dean smiled, not the Dean Martin smile, the public one, the smooth one. This was something else, smaller, real. "You want to come up here?" Dean asked. It wasn't really a question, it was an invitation, an offering, a bridge extended across 11 years of nothing. Jerry looked around, 300 people staring at him, cameras rolling. This would be on television. This would be everywhere. Whatever happened next would define them both for the rest of their lives. "I don't think that's a good idea," Jerry said. "I didn't ask if it was a good idea," Dean said. "I asked if you wanted to come up here." The two men stared at each other. The audience held its breath. The band had stopped playing entirely. Even the cameramen forgot to move. Jerry Lewis climbed onto the stage. He didn't walk the stairs. There were stairs, stage right, that would have been the normal way up. But Jerry, being Jerry, couldn't do anything normally. He grabbed the edge of the stage and hauled himself up, awkward and graceless, and completely him. Dean watched. Didn't help, didn't offer a hand, just watched Jerry struggle onto the stage like he was climbing out of a pool. When Jerry stood up, they were face to face, 3 feet apart. The two men who'd defined comedy for a generation. The two men who'd torn each other apart in ways the public would never fully understand. "You look good," Dean said. "You look old," Jerry said. The audience gasped. Then, after a beat, Dean laughed. A real laugh, and Jerry laughed too. And just like that, the tension cracked. "You want to sing something?" Dean asked. "I don't sing." "You sang in The Stooge." "That was you singing. I was just moving my mouth." "So do it again." Dean walked to the microphone stand, picked up the mic, handed it to Jerry. Jerry looked at it like it was a live grenade. "Dean, I can't." "One song," Dean said, "for Christmas, for old times." Jerry Lewis had spent 11 years building a career without Dean Martin. 11 years proving he didn't need a partner. 11 years being the star, the director, the genius. And now Dean was asking him to be the sidekick again, to be the second voice, to be the other half. And Jerry wanted to say no, wanted to protect his pride, wanted to walk off that stage and never look back. But Dean was holding out the microphone, and Dean's hand was shaking, just slightly, just enough that Jerry could see it. Dean Martin, the coolest man in show business, was nervous. Jerry took the microphone. "What are we singing?" Jerry asked.
"What do you want to sing?"
"I don't know. White Christmas? Everybody sings White Christmas and Silent Night. Too slow. Then you pick." Dean thought for a moment. Then he turned to the bandleader. "Baby, it's cold outside," Dean said. The bandleader's eyes went wide. That song required 2 people. A back and forth, a duet. It was intimate, playful. It required chemistry. It required partnership. "You're kidding," Jerry said. "I never kid about Christmas music." The band started playing. Dean and Jerry stood at the microphone. They hadn't rehearsed, hadn't discussed who would take which part. But when Dean started singing the first line, Jerry came in on the response like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Because they had, not this song specifically, but this dynamic, this rhythm, this wordless understanding of where the other person would be and what they'd do next. The audience started crying. Not all of them, not at first, but you could hear it. Sniffles, the sound of tissues being pulled from purses. By the second verse, it was spreading. By the bridge, it was half the room. On stage, Dean and Jerry weren't looking at the audience anymore. They were looking at each other, singing to each other. And somewhere in the middle of the second chorus, Jerry's voice broke. Not from a mistake, from something else. Dean kept singing, didn't acknowledge it, didn't stop, just kept going, giving Jerry space to recover. And Jerry did. He came back in on the next line, his voice stronger, and they finished the song together. The audience erupted. Standing ovation, 300 people on their feet, applauding, crying, cheering. The camera operators were wiping their eyes. The director in the booth was shouting, "Keep rolling, keep rolling." Dean and Jerry stood at the microphone, not moving, not acknowledging the applause, just standing there. That was good. Dean said quietly. "Oh yeah," Jerry said. "It was. You should come around more often. You should invite me." Dean smiled. That real smile again, the one nobody else got to see. "Merry Christmas, Jerry." "Merry Christmas, Dean." Jerry handed the microphone back to Dean and walked off stage. Didn't say anything else, didn't wave to the audience, just left the way he'd come, climbing down from the stage instead of using the stairs. Dean watched him go. Then he turned back to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean said, his voice steady again, professional again. "Jerry Lewis." The applause started again, louder this time. Jerry made it to his seat, sat down, put his sunglasses back on, and stayed for the rest of the taping. When the special aired on Christmas Eve, NBC didn't cut the Jerry Lewis moment. They could have. It would have been easy to edit it out, to pretend it never happened, to keep the show running smoothly without the messy reality of two estranged partners having a moment. But Greg Garrison fought to keep it in. And the network, seeing the raw emotion, the genuine humanity, agreed. 40 million people watched Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis sing together for the first time in 11 years. The moment became legendary. People talked about it for decades, called it the most moving moment in television history. But what people didn't know, what the cameras didn't show, was what happened after the taping. Dean went to his dressing room, sat down in front of the mirror, and cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man moved by a beautiful moment. The ugly, heaving sobs of a man who'd been holding something in for so long that when it finally broke free, it destroyed him. His assistant found him 20 minutes later. Dean was still sitting there, staring at his reflection, his face red and swollen. "You okay, boss?" Dean didn't answer right away, just kept staring. "I thought I'd never see him again," Dean said finally. "I thought we'd both just go on. Pretend it never happened. Pretend we never meant anything to each other." "You sang together," the assistant said. "That's something. One song." Dean said. "In 11 years, one song. Maybe it's a start." But it wasn't a start. It was an ending. Dean and Jerry didn't speak again for another 9 years. Not because of anger, not because of pride, because that moment on stage had been so perfect, so complete, that anything after it would have ruined it. They'd said everything they needed to say in 3 minutes and 42 seconds of Baby It's Cold Outside. In 1976, Jerry Lewis was hosting the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon. It was his annual tradition, the thing he was most proud of, the cause that defined his later career. Frank Sinatra was a guest that year, and Frank, being Frank, decided to do something dramatic. He brought Dean Martin on stage as a surprise. The reunion was televised. Dean and Jerry hugged. The audience went crazy. Everyone called it a historic moment. But if you watch the footage closely, you can see it. The stiffness, the awkwardness, the sense that they're performing a reunion rather than having one. Because the real reunion had already happened. 9 years earlier, on a December night in Studio 4, when Jerry climbed onto a stage he wasn't supposed to be on, and Dean handed him a microphone he wasn't supposed to hold. That was the moment. Everything after was just epilogue. Dean Martin died in 1995. Jerry Lewis sent flowers to the funeral, but didn't attend. People criticized him for it, called him cold, unforgiving, but Jerry knew something they didn't. He'd already said goodbye, in 1967, on a Christmas special, with a song about winter and wanting to stay, and that goodbye had been perfect. Years later, in an interview, Jerry was asked about the Christmas special moment, about why he'd shown up that night, about what made him climb onto that stage. "I wanted to see if it was still there," Jerry said. "The thing we had, the magic, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to know if it was real or if I'd imagined it. And was it real?" Jerry smiled, a sad, small smile. "For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, he said, it was the realest thing in the world." The 1967 Christmas Special became one of the most re-aired holiday programs in television history. Every year, without fail, someone would upload the Dean and Jerry moment to YouTube. Every year, millions of people would watch it, and every year the comments would say the same thing. "This is what forgiveness looks like." But they were wrong. It wasn't forgiveness. Forgiveness implies there was something to forgive, some betrayal, some wrong that needed to be made right. What happened on that stage wasn't forgiveness, it was recognition. Two men recognizing that they'd been broken by the same thing, that they'd both lost something irreplaceable, that the partnership they'd built and destroyed had taken pieces of them that they'd never get back. And for 3 minutes, they stopped pretending those pieces didn't matter. Dean Martin built a career on looking unbothered, on being the guy who didn't care, who shrugged off everything, who made it all look easy. But on December 16, 1967, in front of 300 people and 40 million more who would watch later, Dean Martin let everyone see that he cared. He cared about Jerry Lewis. He cared about what they'd lost. He cared enough to stop a Christmas special, break every protocol, and sing one song with a man he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. And that caring, that brief, beautiful moment of caring, became the most memorable thing Dean Martin ever did. Not the movies, not the songs, not the Rat Pack, not the cool. A 3-minute duet with his ex-partner on a Christmas special that almost didn't happen. That's what people remembered. That's what mattered. The microphone Dean handed Jerry that night is in a museum now, the Smithsonian, right next to Archie Bunker's chair and Mr. Rogers' sweater. A reminder that sometimes the most important moments in television aren't the ones that were planned. They're the ones that happen when someone breaks the script and does something real.